When the war ended, thousands vanished into jungles across the Pacific. Isolated, uncertain if their nation still existed, these men faced an impossible choice. Some emerged decades later. Others built secret lives. A few never believed the truth. What they discovered changed everything. The Final Order. August 1945. The war ended. Radio broadcasts announced it worldwide. Celebrations filled the streets. But deep in Pacific jungles, unforgotten islands, thousands of Japanese soldiers heard nothing. Their last order was simple: never surrender. Fight until the end. No exceptions. Communication lines had been destroyed. Supply ships stopped arriving months ago. Silence replaced commands. These men didn't know their nation had fallen. They believed the battle still raged somewhere out there. Some were stationed on tiny islands. Others hid in thick jungle valleys. A few lived in mountain caves carved by hand. Days turned into weeks. Weeks became months. Still no word from headquarters. They waited. They watched the horizon. They stayed ready for orders that would never come. What would you do if you didn't know the war was over? For these soldiers, the choice seemed clear: keep fighting or face ultimate shame. But what they didn't know was about to trap them for years, some for decades. The ones who stayed hidden. In 1974, nearly 30 years after the war ended, a man walked out of the Philippine jungle. His name was Hiroo Onoda. He wore a tattered uniform. He still carried his weapon. He was still on his mission. And he wasn't alone in his story. Across the Pacific, other soldiers had done the exact same thing: stayed hidden, stayed loyal, stayed fighting a war that no longer existed. They lived off the land completely. They ate wild plants, hunted small animals, and avoided all contact with locals. Some worked alone for years. Others formed small groups, protecting each other like they were still in active service. They built hidden shelters. They created daily routines. They kept military discipline as if their officers were watching. But here's the strange part. Many of them had seen clear evidence the war was over. Leaflets were dropped from planes overhead. Messages were left in nearby villages. Even local people shouted at them directly. Yet they refused to believe any of it. Why would trained soldiers ignore such obvious proof? The psychology of loyalty. To understand why they stayed, you need to understand their training first. Japanese soldiers were taught that surrender meant the ultimate shame, not just for themselves, but for their entire families back home. The warrior code was called Bushido. It meant loyalty above everything else, death before dishonor, always. Returning home after surrender was completely unthinkable. They genuinely believed their families would reject them forever. So when leaflets fell from the sky saying the war is over, they immediately saw them as enemy tricks. Propaganda, they decided. Clever lies designed to weaken their fighting spirit. Even photographs showing their homeland rebuilding and peaceful, they dismissed them as fake. Expertly crafted forgeries. Their minds built a protective wall between them and reality itself. Some believed Japan had actually won and would send rescue ships any day now. Others thought the battle still raged fiercely elsewhere. This wasn't simple stupidity or stubbornness. It was psychological survival. Their belief system kept them mentally alive in impossible conditions. But belief alone couldn't protect them from what was coming next. The secret lives they built. While some soldiers simply waited in isolation, others adapted in completely unexpected ways. They didn't just survive day to day, they created entire hidden existences that lasted years. On the island of Guam, soldiers lived in deep jungle caves for over a decade, remaining totally undetected by patrols. They developed sophisticated systems for survival, farming small hidden plots, collecting and storing rainwater, even making basic tools from scrap metal they found. Some learned the local language by carefully listening from safe distances. Others traded secretly at night with sympathetic villagers who pitied their situation. A few even took on completely new identities, living as mysterious hermits, spiritual mystics, or silent wandering workers. They grew old in those jungles. Their hair turned gray. Their faces became deeply weathered. Their bodies aged naturally. But their sense of mission never changed once. These weren't men running away from war or hiding from duty. They were men completely frozen in time within it. The calendar moved forward everywhere else on Earth, but for them, 1945 never truly ended. And then organized search parties started arriving, but not everyone actually wanted to be found. The search and the resistance. Governments knew soldiers were still hiding out there. Desperate families begged officials to organize searches. Teams were sent deep into jungles. Japanese government officials, former military officers, even close family members carrying personal items. They brought photographs, handwritten letters, newspapers showing peace. Clear proof the war was over. But the soldiers didn't trust any of them. Some fled deeper into thick jungle when they heard search parties approaching their areas. Others watched silently from hidden positions in trees, convinced it was an elaborate trap. One soldier was found and shown a current newspaper. He studied it carefully and refused to believe it. "Enemy forgery," he stated flatly. Another soldier heard his own brother's voice calling his name through the trees. He stayed completely silent above. It wasn't just stubborn pride or foolish denial. It was genuine terror. Accepting the truth meant accepting they'd wasted precious years, that their enormous sacrifice meant absolutely nothing, that the entire world had simply moved on without them. But one particular man's story would reveal just how impossibly deep the denial went. The man who wouldn't believe. Hiroo Onoda, the soldier who finally emerged in 1974, had actually been found multiple times before. He rejected every single attempt. In 1950, one of his close companions surrendered to authorities. Onoda called him a traitor immediately. In 1972, he met a young Japanese student who told him directly the war was over. He simply didn't believe him. Finally, his former commanding officer was brought to the remote island. The officer, now elderly and long retired, read Onoda the official military order. "You are relieved of duty. The war is over." Only then did Onoda slowly lower his weapon. But even as he walked out of that jungle, part of him still struggled to fully accept reality. Other soldiers experienced the exact same thing. Some needed direct orders from their specific original officers. A few never accepted it at all. They died in the jungle decades later, still completely convinced they were actively protecting Japan from invasion. So what actually happened when they finally returned home after all those years? The homecoming. The Japan they returned to didn't exist anymore, not the one they remembered. Cities were completely rebuilt with modern buildings. Culture had shifted dramatically. Technology had advanced several decades. Onoda returned to flashing cameras, eager reporters, and massive crowds. He was publicly called a national hero, but inside he felt completely lost. The country he'd fought for was gone. Other soldiers experienced the exact same painful shock. Their families had moved on with life. Childhood friends had aged or passed away. Some soldiers struggled deeply to adapt to normal life. They'd spent literal decades in pure survival mode, following routine, maintaining discipline, having clear purpose. Now suddenly they had none of that structure. A few wrote books about their experiences. Others gave public speeches. Many lived very quietly, haunted by everything they missed. They'd sacrificed absolutely everything for a war that ended without them knowing it. The world celebrated their incredible loyalty, but the soldiers felt only deep absence, years stolen, life missed, time gone forever. And their story raises one final, genuinely uncomfortable question. The legacy and the lesson. These soldiers weren't cowards running from battle. They weren't foolish or ignorant men. They were products of their training, their culture, their specific time in history. Their loyalty was real, their sacrifice was real, but the war they fought had ended long ago. Today, historians study them carefully to understand belief, propaganda, and the human mind. Psychologists examine how people reject reality when it conflicts with core identity. Their story serves as a reminder. Sometimes the hardest battle isn't against an enemy. It's against letting go of what you believed was absolutely true. The last known holdout was discovered in 1974. But rumors still persist of others remaining out there. Likely untrue, but the legend remains alive. These men gave everything for duty, and in the end, duty gave them nothing back. Their choice shaped their fate completely, and their story still echoes today. It makes us ask, what beliefs are we holding on to that no longer serve us? What wars are we still fighting that already ended? The stories of Hiroo Onoda and Shoichi Yokoi remind us how far loyalty can push the human spirit. These Japanese holdouts in the Philippines and Guam became legends, men discovered in jungles decades after everyone else went home. The last Japanese soldier from WW2 to emerge showed us that sometimes the hardest part of any battle is knowing when it's truly finished. Their refusal to surrender wasn't about war anymore. It was about identity, honor, and the impossibly heavy weight of letting go. History remembers them not as fighters, but as men trapped between two worlds.